Hi, my name is Billy Rabbitt, and I want to welcome you to Real Talk Real Estate with Rabbitt. This is where we talk about real estate topics here in the Maryland, Virginia, and DC area. Today we're going to be talking about septic holding tanks. Holding tanks have become much more popular over the last couple years, especially with new legislation that the state of Maryland has actually implemented here in our area. What is a holding tank? Well, a holding tank is a form of septic system. A holding tank is exactly that. It's a tank that holds the waste that you actually create inside your house. It is very similar to, and a lot of people refer it or they compare it to, that of like a motorhome or a camper or something like that, where the waste is actually going into a tank that's typically buried or exposed above ground, and a septic hauler or licensed septic company will actually haul that waste away. Before we go any further, I want to disclose that I am not a licensed contractor when it comes to septic systems, but I am a licensed real estate agent. And septic systems and holding tanks have become a huge topic of discussion when either I'm working with buyers or sellers. I actually have sold, and I actually have a house listed right now that actually has a holding tank. Holding tanks in the industry have really gotten a bad rap in my opinion. Holding tanks are really shunned by a lot of real estate agents. I think mostly because they don't really understand how they operate or what they are or what the pros and cons of a septic holding tank system really are. So I want to go through a little bit of this today with you. Let's talk about cons when it comes to holding tanks. And a lot of the conversation that we're having today is going to be around holding tanks in the state of Maryland. So what are the cons around holding tanks? Well, the biggest one, and probably the one that everybody talks about, and really the holdup with all that, is the added expense of having to pump this system every 1 to 3 months. Now, I want to say 1 to 3 months, but it really depends on the usage that you or your family or whoever's living in that property is actually putting, and how much strain or how much waste is actually being created in that system. Maryland is one of the very few states in the United States that actually has not or does not recognize gray water systems. Other states throughout the United States, even some with even some harsher legislation around this, have actually recognized gray water systems, but Maryland has not yet done that. This could be for a whole host of reasons. I'm going to contribute it on the impact that it has on our Chesapeake Bay. So what is gray water? So let's stop there for a second. Gray water is any water or wastewater that's created by a house that is not fecal matter. Well, what's fecal matter? Well, as you can imagine, fecal matter is typically what goes in the toilet. So most of the water that's created that actually will be flowing into your holding tank is actually gray water. Gray water could be from from washing your dishes, doing the laundry, and this is where the majority of the water, and like I said earlier, Maryland has not recognized gray water systems. A lot of gray water systems throughout the United States actually will flow out into the yard and actually will go and actually supply water to gardens, trees, different landscaping throughout the house, and is a huge saving from the water that's actually going into the actual holding tank system. Maryland has changed some of the legislations over the recent years of what they deem as a satisfactory septic system and what's not a satisfactory septic system. One of the biggest things, or one of the largest impacts that we're seeing today, is the actual distance from the top of the drain field to the actual water table. And if there's not a sufficient buffer there, the state of Maryland is actually deeming and recognizing these as failing systems. If you think about a lot of the communities that we have throughout the Maryland area, especially in southern Maryland, a lot of these are water, niche or water type communities. If you think about Golden Beach, a lot of the different communities throughout Calvert, where there's low-lying property, even in Charles County, when you get down into the Cobb Island or the Newburgh area, a lot of these areas, the water table is very high from the top of the ground. So deeming a lot of these septic systems has actually failed according to the state of Maryland. In order to actually get a passing septic system, you then have to create a mound system, which is a system that is now created above the ground or creating a mound, or you have to install a holding tank. The reason that Maryland is making a lot of these changes is because they do not want this wastewater running into our rivers, our streams, or anything that is, contributing to the actual watershed of the Chesapeake Bay. When you think about when some of these houses were built, A lot of them were built in the 60s, the 70s, and a lot of the legislation, a lot of the rules and regulations around septic systems and what is acceptable and what's not acceptable has changed. This has caused the need or the desire for the state of Maryland to install holding tanks versus your traditional septic system. A traditional septic system has what they call drain fields. So when you flush the toilet or when you release water into your plumbing system, it will then go out to what they call is a tank or a septic tank. This then runs to a distribution box. The distribution box then rolls out to, and it could range from house to house, but it ranges out and it goes out to what they call is a drain field. The drain field then takes the water in and then will actually dissipate that water into the ground, and the natural filtration or the soil will actually filter that water before it gets into the groundwater. The distance from the drain field to the actual water table in some of these low-lying communities, some of these these neighborhoods that are actually near the water, the distance is not enough that the state of Maryland has actually deemed them failing. But don't worry, the state of Maryland has actually created a grant program to help offset some of the cost of this holding tank system. They recognize that a holding tank is not desirable by most people, and they have actually been able to establish a grant program that will actually offset the cost of doing that. Now look, before you apply, make sure you check out our resources below in the link. You will be able to find some great resources and find out some more information about the grant program and who's actually, who is acceptable for this and who's not. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions about holding tanks. So if you think about some of these areas that are actually going to need a holding tank or a mound system, and look, a lot of areas or a lot of houses that have actually installed a holding tank, they were actually acceptable for a mound system as well. But due to cost, because mound systems can be very, very costly, especially with some of the new regulations. Local health departments throughout the state of Maryland are now requiring an engineer to go out and create a suitable septic system for your application or for your house. If you could imagine, hiring an engineer to now draw up plans to then submit it and going back, this could be a very, very timely process. And if you are in the middle of a sale of your home, this could be very expensive. When you hire an engineer to come out and now design a mound system that's going to be suitable or acceptable by the state of Maryland for your property, you could be talking about $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. We've even seen some of these systems go all the way up to $75,000 to $100,000 depending on the application. If you think about how expensive some of these systems can be by having to hire an engineer to go out and design this new system, or the cost of having to pump the tanks, it almost equals the same. If not, sometimes in some applications, depending on the cost of the mound system, the holding tank system is actually your cheaper or more beneficial system. The normal pump out of a holding tank system is anywhere between $200 to $300. So let's use $250 right there in the middle. So if you have a system that now costs $40,000, it would take you nearly 26 years to pump out that septic system if you're averaging about a pump out every 2 months. And look, many people are seeing pump outs from even up to 3 to 4 months, depending on the use, your appliances, how well you're, maintaining your system. So it would nearly take 26 years to offset that $40,000 cost. So if it took 26 years to offset the cost of this engineered system, and you'll be able to offset months and lots of frustration from having to hire an engineer and getting the engineer out there and doing all of that running back and forth or whatever, why would you not just offset the cost if you're selling the property? Why would you just not offset the cost of some of the pumpings for the new buyer? The other thing, at least for now, the state of Maryland is offsetting and making sure that they're covering the cost of these holding tanks. So the holding tank system is free. So if you have any issues with that holding tank system, the state of Maryland will help you with some of those costs. So let's do a quick recap of today's conversation. So the state of Maryland only recognizes a few different systems when it comes to or in regards to septic systems here in the state of Maryland. One of them, of course, is the public sewer system. Then you have a septic system, and that could be either a typical or a traditional septic system with drain fields or a mound system. And this is a mound that is above the ground or above grade that will then offset some of that low-lying area. The last option, and what we've talked about in detail here, is the holding tank system. Please, before discounting or moving on your search, if you really love that home, make sure you're looking at all the pros and cons of this system. A lot of real estate agents in our area, they don't understand what the mound system really truly does or what the holding tank system truly is. But I would challenge you to make sure that you're looking at all the costs, the pros and the cons, the cost benefit of it, because you might find out that this house with a holding tank actually might not be as bad as you think. Pumping the system out, if you have a holding tank, let's say anywhere between 4 and 6 times a year, that cost could be very minor, in consideration to the cost of having to put a mound system in at your house. And we're seeing a lot of limitations with mound systems, especially with a lot of the lower lots or the smaller lots, because they just don't have the area or they don't have the range to be able to put these drain fields in to properly secure these houses. As holding tanks become more popular, especially in the state of Maryland, I would challenge you to make sure you're doing all of your research. There's lots of pros and cons to every type of septic system, whether it's public sewer all the way down to a holding tank, any type of septic system that's flowing into the ground. There's pros and cons to everything. I would make sure that you do your own research or make sure you're talking to a professional. We're seeing more and more of these holding tank systems, whether it's because of the limitation between the groundwater and the, in the drain field area, or there just might not be enough area for them to actually put, traditional drain fields into that particular lot. So please do your research, make sure you're very confident and you're comfortable with the purchase of the home and you know all of the different things that you're getting yourself into. Like I said, a lot of agents, they're steering clients away from, buying a house with a holding tank. But I would encourage you to make sure you're doing your own research. That way you are making an educated purchase. If you have any questions about holding tanks, any of those systems, traditional septic systems, or you need some recommendations on some qualified, professionals here in the area, make sure you visit our website at exploremdhomes.com. We have a lot of really great resources that you will find very helpful in your home search here in the Maryland, DC, and Virginia area. Please, if you thought that today's information was of use, make sure you follow and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to have lots of great content coming your way. Until next time, thank you so much.